So I want to welcome everyone to St. Peter's University Graduate Webinar Series. My name is Ellen Gregorio. I'm the Director of Graduate and International Admissions. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight for our webinar, How Social and Traditional Media Are Changing Public Relations. Our webinars invite prospective graduate students to engage with faculty and industry professionals on trending topics, as well as learning more about graduate education and career opportunities. So we invite you to participate by answering any polls, writing in the chat, asking questions in the question and answer area, and learning more about the Public Relations and Communications program at St. Peter's University. So I'd like to start off by introducing Dr. Barna, Donovan. He is the Program Director of the Public Relations and Communications Graduate Program. And Dr. Donovan teaches undergraduate and graduate courses such as marketing, communications, and branding, film, social networking and new media, and media business. Dr. Donovan also wrote several books on film and audiences, and his commentaries on conspiracy theories, popular culture, and film have been quoted in media like Forbes, the BBC, CBS News, and many more. So without further ado, I'm going to kick off the program with Dr. Donovan.
All right, thanks a lot, Ellen, and thank you everybody for joining us, our guests, Mr. Jody Fisher, for joining us. And let me just toss in a quick bit of information about just a moment about the program and where it's oriented, the sorts of careers, sorts of fields that our graduates are usually working in, and things that we train our students for, and then some of the just a very brief overview of some classes that we teach. Although you have a web page up for the program where you can take a look at the information more detail. Always reach out to me or faculty if you have specific questions. But we're oriented towards training people for careers like public relations, advertising, public relations management, any kind of advocacy positions, be they advocacy and image management for entrepreneurs, for their small businesses, people working in corporate or nonprofit sectors. And so any place where your job is to communicate the image, the mission of your organization to the publics, we teach you the skills for that. I mean, some of the classes that you would be taking in our program would be, of course, the public relations course, social networking course, marketing and branding, crisis communication, and along with research methods courses that let you learn how to gather the information, how to do the research that your various fields would require you to do before you become those effective advocates. But again, the information on the specific classes is available on our webpage, and you're always free to reach out to me. So let me turn it over to our guest, Mr. Jody Fisher, who's the Vice President of Public Relations at the Austin Williams firm. And if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to the career that you are in.
Well, good evening, and thanks very much for having me, Barna. Really appreciate the invitation, and I'm happy to share what knowledge I can impart to your prospective students. So as you mentioned, I am Vice President of Public Relations at Austin Williams, been doing that for the last 5 years. I've been in public relations since 1999, combination of in-house and agency work. Before that, I was a radio reporter. And so I started out after I graduated college. In fact, when I went to college, I went to school at at Fordham University. I always say I went to school at WFUV. I graduated from the radio station because I spent 5 days a week there. I probably spent more time at the radio station than I did in the classroom when I was in college. And so went on after graduation to become a radio reporter and did that for about 6 years. Eventually got dissatisfied and tired of being a reporter and wanted to transfer into public relations. I at the time assumed that my life would be quieter being a public relations person, and now my life is anything but. So things stay quite busy. But in public relations, we do the things you might expect and the things you might not expect. Yes, we do a lot of writing. Yes, we do a lot of press releases and pitching reporters and organizing press conferences and things like that. But we do an awful lot of research. We do an awful lot of writing behind the scenes. We do an awful lot of strategizing and figuring out what stories to pitch, what reporters to reach, what outlets and what audiences, and to really make the most possible sense for the clients that look to us to represent them and to get their message across.
Thank you very much. So we are looking forward to fantastic discussion with all the experience that you're bringing to us, and we can dive into the official questions that we've told our audiences that we want to touch on. Starting very specifically with the title of our program, of how are social and traditional media changing the public relations public relations field, like just things that throughout your career that you have seen. How has this transition from one form of media to another been playing out?
Sure, it's a terrific question. When I started in radio, which is back in let's see, professional radio would have been 1993, but I started in radio in 1989. Back then, the computer that was on your desktop was the printer was a dot matrix printer. The computer had very simple AP wire stories coming across it. Most of the AP wire stories actually printed out of the printer. The most technological thing in the newsroom, other than the cart machine, was the fax machine. All the press releases, all the advisories came over a fax machine. You delivered those to the editor. If the toner was up to date in the fax machine, you could actually read it. Fast forward to today, where I'm standing here in my garage, which is where I do my work when I work from home, and where I tape my podcast, which is why I have my microphone and my headphones here. I'm standing here looking at 3 screens and a webcam. That's like science fiction compared to where things were, back in the late 80s and early 90s when I started out. And so I think just by virtue of the technology, we've taken huge leaps forward in terms of the amount of information that's available and the speed with which that information is communicated. I think those are the 2 key things that have changed over the course of the last 30, 40 years.
Mm-hmm. To navigate all of this, because the technology seems to be changing overnight, that just about every time you have a new app, a new social medium popping up left and right. What do you and other professionals in the field do, or what should you be doing to keep on top of this? And also, for young people going into the field, is this a really their strength, that that do they know how to TikTok and what the latest social media craze is? Is this a field that's especially welcoming to the to young people looking to break in?
Well, surely the younger people who have grown up with and come of age with all of this technology at their fingertips, digital natives, not me, digital natives who understand really the ins and outs of how to use all this technology to their benefit. They have a terrific advantage as long as they keep up with it. I want to be very clear that the technology itself doesn't make it better. And public relations and journalism, which go hand in hand, still come back to the same basic thing, which is it a good story? Is this information that needs to be shared with a particular audience? And that remains the same regardless of whether you're making a TikTok video or you're putting out a story on the AP Newswire, or you've got something that's landing on your front porch in printed form in your local newspaper. The story telling aspect of this is what is critical. And that has remained consistent over the last 25, 30 years that I've been in public relations, and even before that.
Mm-hmm. Has that storytelling been a challenge where you have to go and switch from writing up the long press release that you email out or that you fax out, and now you go and jump to your Twitter or on Instagram, or how much is the new media being the social media being used by the people in the field?
Well, certainly everybody in public relations either is or should be on social media for the one main reason, and especially on Twitter, because that's where the reporters live. The reporters that you're trying to communicate with, that you want to be talking to, they're all on social media. Most of them, like I said, are on Twitter, because that's kind of the old AP news feed, right? That's, as you see it scroll by, even with the algorithm that'll kind of mix things up, it's still kind of chronological. And certainly for breaking news, that's where news breaks. That's where news organizations break news just as fast as they post something on their website. They'll post something to the Twitter feed. That's considered breaking news. And in fact, they'll put something up and then maybe they'll update the website and then tweet a second tweet with a link back to the story, again, driving people back to their main product, which is either their website in the form of their news product in form of their website, whether they're radio, TV, broadcast, what have you. So social media is at the center of what news organizations do now, and has been for a very long time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then when the PR professional sees the information, you have to react to it or turn that around. Should people coming into a school, into a PR program, should they be should we be teaching them very specific writing skills, communication skills that are now just focused on the quick tweet, just a couple of sentences to grab an attention?
Actually, I think Twitter is a terrific, what's the word? It's a terrific way to hone the skills of getting your message across quickly and directly. When we send news pitches to reporters, you've got an email, right? Think you've got the subject line, you've got the body of the email. If you can't catch the reporter's attention with that subject line and the first sentence or two of copy, you've lost. So if you're writing effectively for Twitter, you're going to write terrific news pitches to reporters, because that's all the time they have. I mean, think about, I'm one PR guy. I may send out anywhere between 2 and 20 pitches a day, right? Because I have 10 clients. I could be pitching multiple stories. I could be pitching multiple stories to multiple outlets, depending on what the subject matter is. And we can talk about, how you can take a singular story and put it in different outlets and change it just a little bit, depending on the outlet and the audience you're trying to reach. Multiply out, my average pitches at 2 to 20 by the 100 or 200 or 500 or 1,000 PR people who may be emailing that one reporter in any given day. That email inbox of that reporter is just spinning and spinning and spinning like a Kardashian getting Instagram likes. It just does not stop. So you've got to really be able to catch the reporter's attention, that subject line, that first sentence or two of copy, just like you might post a tweet. If you can do that well, you'll do all right in PR, I think.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, right. So it's very much focused to the point, extremely concise communication style, right? That people need to become experts at.
And you write it in a way that is appropriate to the medium, right? You may write a radio pitch different from a TV pitch, different from a print pitch, different from a digital pitch. There's a temptation to cram a lot of information into a pitch. Reporters don't want that. They don't want all of it, right? They want enough of it that they can envision themselves doing it. They want enough information that allows them to go, oh, I could see myself doing this story. Or Or, oh, I wouldn't do this story, but the person who sits to my right or my left does this story. Let me forward it to my editor. Let me forward it to this person. It's just enough to let them envision the story actually happening in their outlet. Now, that'll be different. Like I said, you're going to send a different pitch to a radio reporter than you would to a TV editor, than you would to a print reporter. I tend to want to put in a few hyperlinks. I will try not to put attachments in, because attachments can get messed up with email filters, and we can get into the weeds on, how news organizations program their email filters to reject a lot of spam and a lot of things like that. Because don't forget, think of your favorite news outlet. If they're getting 200 pitches a day, then they're getting 10,000 spam messages a day. And they're getting 100,000, listener or reader comments a day. Plus, they're getting all the internal traffic on their email server. I mean, that email server is busy. And so their IT departments really clamp down on what comes in from the outside. So you have to be very careful about what you put in your pitch when you're sending it from the outside to a reporter or an editor.
Do you have any tips on how the rejection process there might work? Because we also tell people that if you're doing this program, you might be doing this for yourself. Maybe you're learning these skills because you want to be an entrepreneur, and you're already established a small business, and now you want to know how to be your own PR person. So it's somebody running some kind of a small business, some kind of an organization. I mean, my writing was mentioned in the intro. So I'm writing books. I'm writing fiction that I need to help my publisher out in promoting, and need to do my own press releases. So, what are any main tricks that you would tell us to be mindful of, how to get through that filter process, the gatekeeping process?
Well, going back to your question about, what are some of the things that get rejected? You never know what gets rejected. There was a little while there back about 15 years ago where we were told that the New York Times email server would automatically reject any email that had the subject line in all caps. And we changed our style real quick, because we used to, the firm I was working with at the time would put the date in the subject line and would put it in all caps. So we changed that real quick. You never know how these things get programmed, and you really shouldn't worry about them too much, or at least don't, get analysis paralysis overthinking it. I think, going back to what we said about Twitter, write a concise, direct, straight to the point kind of subject line. The first two sentences should be critically important. Here's what you need to know. Here's the who, what, where, when. It's the basic stuff, right? The who, what, where, when, why, and how. When is a really important question to answer for a reporter, because the first question that the reporter, maybe the second question that the reporter asks themselves is, when do I need to write this story? Do I need to write it today? Is it more appropriate for a week from now, or is it evergreen and I can roll this out when times are slow? So when is a really critical piece of information to put into your pitches? I would also just recommend that when you do send a pitch, if you're sending it on behalf of a client, whether that's, your example, you're trying to help promote your own book, or you're doing something for yourself, or you're promoting a client, put the link to their website in there. Link back to their web property, because that shows legitimacy. That demonstrates that what you're talking about is real, and here is proof, here is evidence of that. I also will put in, whenever I put out press releases or media advisories, which is, coverage advisories, things like that, I will always put the main social media handles of the client in there as well, because frequently, I guess all the time really, if somebody writes a story or publishes it on their website, they will sometimes, or they put it on social media, they will put the tag of the person, that person's profile in that tweet, let's say, right? So one of my clients is Malloy College in Rockville Center. We really like it when Newsday, who covers Malloy College on the regular, when they tweet a story that they put Molloy College's handle in there, right? As opposed to just saying Molloy College. You want to link back to the client's property. So put those social media handles in there as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the major jobs of people working in public relations and in any field, be they big corporations, in politics, oftentimes we have people coming to our program who have maybe a background in political science and they want to do political communication and advocacy. Will be times of crisis, right? Isn't that's when our public relations professional stripes are really earned, right? When you're managing a crisis. So, what are the benefits and the importance of very quick reputation management during a time of crisis?
How much time do you have for this answer? I'll try to keep it brief. There are different types of crises. In my mind, there's only one true type of crisis, and that's when somebody's dead. When there is death involved, that is a true crisis. Other than that, there are just challenges to you and your reputation. That's not to say that they're not important, but they can be handled a little bit differently. Let's talk a little bit about that. And I guess one interesting example is what just happened over the weekend with the Sex and the City show and Peloton, and how they responded to what seemed to be a surprise and certainly a challenge to their reputation. Long story short, Peloton was featured in this show, and it was implied that someone exercising on the bike had a heart attack immediately afterwards. It was implied that the bike actually triggered the heart attack. Peloton came out very, very quickly afterwards, within 12 hours, with a statement saying that the reason the character in the show died was because this character, ate steak and smoked cigars and all kinds of things, and that, regular exercise has scientifically proven health benefits. But over the weekend, got very, very smart and created a response ad that dropped on Sunday afternoon at 3:00 and showed up in my Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and TikTok feeds simultaneously, which was, we'll just cut to the chase, a very witty and cutting and smart kind of jab back at the show. And it was brilliant. I thought it was really terrific. And social media today is lit up with everybody's, hot take on what this thing did. I think to go to broad brush about crisis response and crisis communications, you have to have a couple things. One, you have to be paying attention. You have to know as soon as the crisis hits. You can't be asleep at the wheel. Two, you have to have a crisis communications team in place before the crisis happens. You have to know who the decision makers are around the table, and that table should be as small as possible. It should be 2 or 3 or 4 people. Certainly legal counsel should be one of them, but PR should drive the show because it is a message that's got to come back, and it can't be the CFO, it can't be the CEO, it can't be they all have to have input, but the PR people have to be running the show. And drive the message and the timeline forward, because you can't sit and think about what you're going to say for too long. It's got to pass muster with legal, because you don't want to open up a legal can of worms. So legal should definitely be there. But you've got to assess the crisis. You've got to formulate a response to the crisis, and you've got to get it out as quickly as possible. Even if the response to that crisis is sort of a non-response response, you've got to say something. Not every scenario requires you to hire Ryan Reynolds' marketing company and produce a slick video that drops on social media and lights up the internet the next day.
Mm-hmm. Something that I always tell my students, both undergraduate and graduate students, is that one of the major differences in the age of social media versus a couple of decades ago is that now everybody is a mass communicator. Go back maybe 20 years, certainly before that, the mass communicators were the people running a a newspaper or running a TV station or a movie studio. Now it can be a kid sitting in a basement, but he's writing about something that has gathered him 2 million followers, and this person can whip up outrage. That has the social media world made it easier to create crises now? And is the crisis management, you think, harder, where something crazy can come out of the blue because it was spread entirely through social media?
Well, I think it's, we used to talk, oh God, I guess it was 25 or 30 years ago, about how cable news and all news, cable stations like CNN and the others had destroyed the news cycle, right? The news cycle used to be kind of split up into different parts of the day, whether it was, morning and midday and evening and overnight, or whether it was two cycles, 12 hours and 12 hours, what have you. That we used to joke that now cable news is 24 hours. So that's it. It's a 24-hour news cycle. Well, now the news cycle is about 5 minutes long, because social media has turned everything into a churn machine. As quickly as stories can break on social media, they will be swept away by the next thing that breaks on social media. And it is up to the traditional and the earned media folks at newspaper, radio, TV to sort of slow that cycle down, because they're the ones that will actually break it down and analyze it and fit it into their compartments on their platforms. All news radio, for example, you have morning drive, you have afternoon drive, and then you have the other bits in between. TV, you've got, the morning news show, maybe the midday news show, the evening news show. Newspaper, you've got a single edition a day with updates to the website throughout. So traditional media actually slows that cycle down a little bit. And social media is what makes it churn a lot quicker. I mean, just take the last 4 years without getting political at all. There were some weeks where stories were happening and breaking on Twitter, created by the people who were creating them and then being reported on by the people who were reporting on them. And by the time, something would happen on a Monday, by the time you got to Friday, the thing that happened on Monday seemed like it happened 2 years ago. That's how fast things move with social media. And I'm not saying anything new. The people who have, like, as we talked about, the digital natives, they've grown up with this. This is normal for them. This is just the way the world works now.
Right. Also, one of the big social concerns that we've been wrestling with over the past couple of years. I mean, certainly, very soon we're coming up on the anniversary of the riots and at the Capitol. It's just a culture of misinformation, of conspiracy theories. Like Ellen was mentioning, that's something that I've written about, I've researched about, written about it. Fictionally and both non-fictionally. I teach a class on it. I have been trolled by conspiracy theorists because I criticize the culture. If people were to Google me, you'd find some crazy conspiracy sites writing some really outrageous stuff about. I mean, sometimes I feel like a James Bond villain. They're accusing me of trying to control the world, and it's not being hyperbolic. So, but I mean, sometimes when this becomes very serious, because you do have various scientists or educators or doctors who are getting really aggressive trolling and threats, and just we see so many people believing so much of the misinformation. The COVID over the past 2 years has inspired so many people to avoid vaccinations because of them really hair-raising beliefs about their DNA being altered by vaccines. That is it now time for academia and the sciences and doctors to learn PR skills, or to work specifically with public relations professionals to get this information out and cut through the haze, all the garbage, basically, all the misinformation?
Sure. Well, and I say this having been a reporter myself, I would never say that I was a journalist, because journalists are very serious people, and I was just a guy in the street with my microphone. Reporters are always interested in the truth. True reporters are always interested in the truth. They want to know what's going on. They want to have it verified 3 ways, and they want to print what is factually accurate. Reporters are different from commentators. Commentators, people who sit behind desks, whether you're on Fox or CNN or The Daily Show, they inject their own perspective on the news. Now, it comes across to people who don't know how to consume news in an intelligent way or in a critical way. Let's put it that way. It comes across as official news, but it's not. And the combination of that, it's sort of infotainment, and things were going this way the last, I'd say going back 15 or 20 years, especially with the rise of, talk shows on cable news immediately following the evening news. You had the rise of that, and that really goes back to the original, SNL, Saturday Night Live with Dan Aykroyd and Jane Curtin behind a desk, portraying news anchors and sort of joking with each other. I mean, that's the original formula. But commentators sitting behind a desk putting their perspective on news was then weaponized in the last 4 years by people with a particular political persuasion, who decided that they were not only going to give their perspective on the news, but actually deliver the news the way they thought it should be delivered, the way they thought they wanted their facts to be, which very quickly, again, critical consumers of news figured out was not true. The challenge to that is that misinformation, that deliberate misinformation of the American public was so loud and so strong that the people who wanted the facts to come out started their own version of that. And so now you've got the opposite pole, the political poles across the spectrum, both doing their own version of information. And you've got one group that is deliberately misinforming the public, and then you've got another group that is just trying to yell just as loud to counter the misinformation, and it all drowns each other out. And I think we've got a real mess in American news and news consumption, because now what we've created is echo chambers. And you can find a group of people who are doing the job of journalism, big J, and presenting information as factual, verifiable information that sounds good to your ear. It reinforces what you think. And so you're going to go over here and you're going to listen to this group of people because what you think what they say is the truth, and it sounds good enough. And the same thing on the other side. And I heard someone say this, and I forget who to credit it to, but it's the absolute truth. As a country, in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, we all came home from work and we sat down and we watched one of 3 news anchors, and they all basically told us the same thing. Now we can all go anywhere we want and hear anything that we want. And if it reinforces our opinion of what we originally believe, we think that that's the news. Mm-hmm. And that's not it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's the challenge to PR people, to cut through that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Because I have some friends who are physicians, and sometimes they told me this, that they have patients coming in, and these physicians, they know the science, they know the medicine, and they try to tell their patients to take the COVID vaccine. Or even before COVID, there was the measles vaccine, and there was a big anti-vaccination movement just before COVID. And so these people know the science, they know the information out of the journals, and they try to tell their patients why it's important to take the vaccines. And they're told, no, doctor, I know what's going on. The microchips are in there, and Bill Gates is behind it. it's all over the internet. Everyone's talking about it. I've read about this, so I know what's going on. And so, should that hospital, be working more with PR professionals to teach that doctor, how better to use communication tactics to get through that, how to get through to that person, who believes the microchips, probably using alien technology that crashed in Roswell. That's in the vaccine.
You know your UFO history pretty well. In all seriousness, yes, and I have lots of clients. One of the three verticals that my firm represents is healthcare. The other two are education and higher education and financial services. But in the healthcare field, I've represented several doctors, and also in education, I represent schools that have medical programs. So we're constantly placing medical experts with reporters to do interviews. The short answer to your question is yes. To the degree that you are able to, you should be working with a communications professional who can help hone your message, who can help reach out to the audiences, the outlets that serve the audiences that you want to reach, and present the information that you want to get out. Now, the challenge is using your example of vaccines and COVID, the non-scientific side is probably doing the same thing. And the challenge that I've found, or that I've seen recently, is that both sides are presented as equal time. And there's this concept of, well, you've got to give two sides to every argument. I disagree. The primary job of a newsroom, the primary job of a reporter, is to filter out the crazy. And when crazy comes across your desk, you're supposed to swipe it away, because it's not factually sound. It's not factually accurate. It's provable. It's not like, oh, that's my opinion of what I think. No, it's, in this case, 2 + 2 = 4, right? So the first thing that a newsroom does is swipe the crazy off the desk. Now, if you've got in terms of factual accuracy, if you've got something like a political debate, it's a political debate. Fine, two perspectives on an argument, that's different. But you can't perspectivize science. You can't perspectivize math. There's an answer to it, and that's the answer, and that's what reporters want to do, and that's what PR people want to do. They want to find the truth, and they want to present the truth.
Mm-hmm. Right. Finally, because we also want to give the audience the opportunity to ask some questions too. One final question I wanted to ask: that looking forward to the next couple of years, maybe next months to year or two in the industry. What does the public relations field look like? What do PR companies, PR professionals need to do to remain nimble and on top of all this?
Wow, there's the crystal ball question. I don't know is the honest answer. I'll give you a couple of perspectives. One, media consolidation is going to play a huge role. There are fewer and fewer and fewer people every single day doing the job of being a reporter in a newsroom. And so that is going to be a challenge just in terms of the number of places you have to tell your story. It's also a challenge from the perspective of fewer reporters doing more jobs. And so there are fewer true experts out there anymore. There are far more, and there's a growing number, and this is not their fault. There's a growing number of media generalists who need to be educated. Now that's an opportunity for PR people, right? To help a reporter, to legitimately help a reporter understand a topic at a depth that makes their reporting better. And so I think that's the opportunity that we need to seize to help the reporters. And I say this frequently, my number one client is my client. My number two client is the reporter I'm working with. I have just as much interest in helping the reporter do their job as I do helping the client do their job. And so, and those are the best relationships that you develop, are the reporters who you can help them, give them the information they need to then go and factually do their job, not do their job for them, but help them get that information at their fingertips. They don't have to hunt for it. They don't have, because if they do, you know, you're gone. I think that, like we talked about with social media, I think social media is going to continue to speed things up. I also think that everything is audio and video. I wonder about the future of print. We've been having this conversation for decades, but I wonder about the future of print and where that's going to go. I think lots of things will continue to migrate to digital. I also wonder about linear TV, you know, broadcast TV. I think if you've been awake for 10 seconds, you know that everything's migrating to streaming. I think that's going to continue. And I think it's going to seep into news. The one thing that linear TV still does really, really well is live. And so to the degree that linear TV can continue to do live, things like sporting events or things that are happening or breaking news, stuff like that, I think linear TV will continue to do that. And radio, people have been predicting the demise of radio as long as radio has been around. and as an old radio guy, I can say that I've been waiting for radio to go too. But the reality is radio is the most nimble of all the media, because wherever you can put a phone, you can have a story. Mm-hmm. It doesn't even need to be, I mean, you know, you can shoot TV off your iPhone now too. But radio, all you need is a voice. And if you've got a voice, you've got a reporter on the scene, they can be doing their job right now. And there are, as we speak, hundreds of reporters right now live on the air somewhere doing their job.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, actually, on that note, with the radio, let me ask one question. That you mentioned that you're also doing a podcast. What is the podcast? We'd like to check it out. Like,
well, it'll probably only be interesting to people who are interested in PR. It is called the PR Podcast. And I host it, like I said, here from my garage where I've been working since the start of COVID. Although I do go into the office 3 days a week. I set up out here in the garage because it was easy to set up in the garage. Nobody else wanted to come out here, so that's where I am. But the PR Podcast is available on name your podcast platform: Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, etc. We have social media pages. You can chime in there. And what we do is we interview, it's an episode a week, and we interview people who have an involvement in the news making process. So we talk to PR professionals for sure, but we also talk to reporters and editors and videographers and photographers and anyone who has a role in creating news, because we want to understand better how news gets created, what the decisions are that go into covering the stories of the day. And we talk about all kinds of fun things. So if you like to geek out about PR news, we're the podcast for you.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. For our listeners, that if you want this session to keep giving, by all means, listen to more of Jody's work on the PR Podcast. Do keep in touch with him. Listen to what he has to say and the professionals that he's talking to. But yeah, so sure. Do we have people asking questions? Do we have folks in the chat?
So we don't have any questions at the moment, but I'd like to take the opportunity to ask people again. If you have any questions, just post them in the chat. I'm going to take the opportunity just to briefly go over some of the admissions information and program information on the Masters of Arts in Communications and Public Relations. As I'm speaking again, feel free to go ahead and post any questions, and we'll look at those in just a moment. So, again, we have our Masters of Arts in Communications and Public Relations, and I just quickly want to go over a few of these agenda items. And the first one is why St. Peter's University. So St. Peter's offers courses for a flexible schedule. We have smaller class sizes, which allow you for a more individualized program experience. of course, the faculty expertise that you just heard about, networking with industry professionals such as Jody Fisher, conveniently located in Jersey City for any in-person courses, especially for those working professionals. And we do honor the Jesuit values of commitment of cura personalis, which is the care and concern of each student. So here are some of the admissions requirements for this program. We require everyone to complete an admissions application, submit official transcripts with a minimum GPA of 3.0, 2 letters of recommendation, a personal statement, and a resume, and for any international students, in addition to the above, any language proficiency scores. So funding a graduate education is possible through federal and or private loans. You must be a full-time student for federal financial aid. If you are a part-time student, you can also look, you can look at private loans, which are have varying eligibility requirements depending on the loan originator. So students may borrow a loan up to the cost of attendance. And in any event, we highly recommend for any prospective student to speak with one of our financial aid counselors to discuss their personal scenario and get advice on financing your education. So this is our program, the M.A. in Communications and Public Relations. It's 33 credits. It's $11.77 per credit. In the past, it's been primarily on ground, meaning in person. We have moved to more online, and I believe, Dr. Donovan, most of the courses being offered now are online, correct?
Yes, they're synchronous online courses. So we're trying to really combine the best of both worlds, where you have the real-time instruction, the interaction between professors and students, and then also the convenience of not having to travel into campus every week. So it's this synchronous online format that we've been transitioning over into.
Okay, wonderful. And then moving on to some frequently asked questions, there is no application fee. We do not require GRE or GMAT scores. While we don't have application deadlines because we accept applications on a rolling basis, we do encourage students to submit all of their documents as early as possible to be admitted for the preferred start term. And then once you submit all of your required documents, as mentioned earlier, it typically takes about 1 to 2 weeks to receive an admission decision. And then finally, while we don't offer any institutional grants or scholarships, again, we encourage you to complete the FAFSA and contact financial aid to discuss and review your options. And so if you have any questions on what I just reviewed, you're also welcome to submit those questions in the chat box, or you can contact us at the email and phone number listed on the screen. So that, excuse me one second. That concludes my portion of that. Okay, and we have, let's see, in the chat. Barna, can you see that in the chat, or would you like me to read it out loud?
If you could read it out loud.
Sure. Okay, so this is thanks to the panelists for the relevant contributions. I am Senegalese. I worked 12 years ago in the UN agency as a public relations specialist. My question is how to work better with influencers on social networks who are not journalists, who do not necessarily base their questions on facts.
Sure, that's a great question, and thanks for writing it in. I do some work with social media influencers with a few clients of mine. I'll say this, that social media is, with the exception of official news properties that are, tweeting stories or posting stories that are reporter style stories. Everybody else is on social media to express their opinion, and that's what it's there to do. And so you need to choose the social media influencers. I think they like to be called content creators now, or creators now. I think that's the new phrase that they want to use. You need to choose the people, just like you might a reporter, based on who they talk to, who their audience is, the type of channel that they run, the way they like to post, everything about them, and evaluate them, and do they fit your client, your message, your thing that you're trying to do, and then engage with them and work with them in that way. So in that respect, it's not much different from working with a reporter. I know that from working with social media influencers, creators, it's always expected to give them some parameters about the way you'd like to work with them, especially when you're asking them, for example, to promote a product or a service or something like that on their channel, because that's typically what they'll do. You can determine the number of posts you'd like them to do, or whether you want them to do a reel or what's the other thing? A story on Instagram. Like I said, I think the short story is that it all depends on who you want to engage in. You've got to evaluate who you want to engage in. Do they make sense for you? And then go after them and explain what you want to accomplish. Pitch them the story. Pitch them the idea that you have for them, and go forward in that relationship. I think also, what is different from a reporter versus a content creator is that you do have the ability, I think, to kind of call it quits with the content creator before they actually post something. Whereas if you engage with a reporter, you start to put something out there, it's kind of challenging to pull it back. And I hope that answered your question too.
And I believe that is the only question in the chat. So we are right on time. I want to thank Mr. Fisher and Dr. Donovan for an outstanding webinar. It was really informative and enlightening. It is very much changing public relations in that the dynamics of public relations today. So we appreciate your time and effort in this webinar tonight. And I just want to remind everyone that this was recorded. So even if you attended tonight, you will receive an email with the recording in it to listen more in on the webinar. And the podcast name again, Mr. Fisher, is?
Sure. It's The PR Podcast. If you just go on your podcast platform of choice and type in make sure it's The PR Podcast, because there are a couple of PR podcasts out there. Terrible originality is not one of my traits, but also on social media. And if you want to find me on social media, easiest place to find me is on Twitter. I'm at Jody Fisher, JodyFisher. Happy to connect there.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for joining tonight. We wish you happy and safe holidays. Have a wonderful evening, and thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks so much.